Hey everybody, what's going on? Today we're talking the new Sleep Token album, Even in Arcadia. I know this came out about a week ago. I'm a little late to my review, but I really wanted to sit with all of these tracks for a little bit before I gave you guys my thoughts on this. So we're going to get right into it with a track-by-track review of the new Sleep Token album. If you like this video, be sure to stick around for more. I'm going to do a full detailed breakdown of the riff writing, the song structure, the chord progressions, references to some of their older material. So if you want to hear more of that detailed breakdown, be sure to stick around because that video is coming up soon. Also, at this point on the channel, you'll notice that I only have one review up currently. If you watch that review, you'll notice I didn't give an overall score for anything. Like I said in that video, I think art is something that's subjective, and I don't want to give a letter or a grade assignment to this, because to me that doesn't make a lot of sense. What I'd rather do is just give you some of my overall thoughts, positives and negatives, go through track by track, and then give you my top three and some listening suggestions if this is an album that you enjoy. All of that being said, let's get right into it with track number one, Look to Windward. So right out of the gate, I think this song does a really nice job with its sound selection. There's some strings, some synthesizers, all kinds of ambience going on in the background. And I love that they take a 3-minute build-up, which is a long time. That could be a whole song in itself. And they pace it out in a way that makes sense to me, and I didn't get bored at any point during this first 3 minutes. I thought they introduced new layers and kind of ramp up the intensity until we get that first kind of heavy part, and I thought they did a really nice job with that. Another thing that I've always loved about Sleep Token is the lyrics and the imagery that they evoke, and I thought the first 3 minutes of this track, the lyric writing was really excellent and does a really nice job of painting that kind of vivid imagery that they're really good at doing. The heavy stuff that comes after the build-up feels worth it for me, and I really like the riff. I feel like it's one of the stronger ones on this album. But in classic Sleep Token fashion, this song transitions into more kind of that pop, rap, trap influence right after all that heavy stuff. And I like that middle section. I like how they handle all of these transitions. But one of my favorite sections in the whole song comes kind of after that more like rap styled verse, around like the 5.5 minute mark. It just cuts to voice and piano. And then especially when those guitars come back in, like the 6 minute mark, something like that. I think moments like this are what Sleep Token do extremely well. They create these moments of just kind of like lift and breath in the music. And then they introduce some like really catchy melodies. There's some really nice background vocals during this section. And then the riff that kind of comes in to add to that heaviness and that impact of that section. I feel like that's just an example of something they do really well in general. And they did it on this song also very well, I thought. After this section, we get a little bit more buildup and then the return of that riff from the beginning, followed by some good old pitch shifted breakdowns, which I thought they did very nice. And overall, I really just thought this was a good album opener, and it kind of encapsulates so much of what they do really well. So let's move on to track number 2, Emergence. So Emergence was the first song released as a single to promote this album, and to me, it's still one of my favorite songs from this album, and one of my favorite songs that they've done just in general. The opening section with the piano and vocals, I think, again, it really just highlights the vocals that they have, and it's got this kind of ethereal ambient sound going on. And I just think they do a really nice job with those kinds of sections. They do another kind of rap style section, but I think the arpeggiated synthesizer bit is really fun, and like the beat and the groove that they make is really cool. If you want to check out too, I'll link it above. I've got a guitar cover of this section where I learned how to play that tapping section, the synthesizer part on guitar. So if you want to check that out and learn how to do that, make sure to click up there somewhere where that video is linked. They hang on to this section for a little while, and they add in the distorted guitars on that second verse to just add another layer of heaviness to it. Again, I like how they can stick to a section for a while and just add these new elements to keep building and giving the listener something interesting on these repeats of things they've already done. Around the 4.5 minute mark, we get like a really nice heavy section. I really love how the riff sort of mimics the vocal melody. Some of my favorite breakdowns are ones that aren't just zeros on the low string, chugging away. I like ones that have a little bit more melody in them. So I like that this is almost like a singable sort of breakdown, and it maintains its heaviness while still having some kind of melodic element to it. My one complaint with this song is the very ending. We get this nice saxophone solo. It lasts around a minute or so as the song just sort of slowly fades out. The first time I heard this solo, it was kind of a nice surprise. I was not really expecting to hear saxophone at the end of this song. However, I do think it goes on a bit long, and on other listens of this song, I usually find myself kind of skipping this section. Nothing against the solo. I think it's a good solo. I think it's played really well. It sounds really nice, but it just kind of makes the song a little long on repeat listens for me. So usually I kind of skip the song at that point. Overall with this song, I feel like, again, it really highlights all of the genre blending that Sleep Token is known for, and it has some nice heavy elements with some really nice vocal melodies, overall making it just a standout track for me. All right, next up we've got the song Past Self. This song is in much more of a pop direction than the previous two tracks. It starts out with this kind of synthesizer sound. Personally, I really enjoy that little section and the little descending arpeggio thing that they've got going on. I think it's catchy. It is pretty much the whole song, and that's really my biggest issue with the song, is that it doesn't really contain any real instruments. It doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of just hangs out on this little descending chord progression thing. One of Sleep Token's greatest strengths, in my opinion, is their drummer and their guitar writing, whether it's kind of that more distorted heavy stuff or some of the ambient, like clean guitar sounds that they add. And I feel like their drummer adds a lot of groove to some of these more pop sections. We'll talk more about that later for some other songs on here, but this song is just kind of lacking all of those elements, which for me just makes it one of the weaker tracks on this album. I will say what this track lacks in instrumental writing, I do feel like it makes up for that in the vocal writing. I think there are some really catchy melodies in here, and a lot to listen to on re-listens for vocals and background vocals and all kinds of things like that are still make the song interesting. Overall, it's just a song that I end up skipping most of the time. I will say on repeat listens, it is starting to grow on me a little bit more, but I feel a little underwhelmed after the first two tracks on this album. To me, this song just stands out as one of the weaker ones. All right, next up, we've got track number 4, Dangerous. I'll just say now, I think this is my favorite one off the entire album. The ambient guitars building up in the first chorus, it really reminded me how I felt the first time I listened to the song Take Me Back to Eden. Just that first kind of drop on the chorus the first time they do that, and it's this really like ambient ethereal section. That's the stuff that I really love when I'm listening to Sleep Token, and I feel like they did that really well at the beginning of this song. All of this ambience and these kind of haunting vocal melodies really build up to another kind of beat drop rap section, similar to what we got in Emergence. But I really like the beat here, and I feel like they do this part really well. Something that I would really recommend to everybody is that you go and listen to all the background vocals in this song, and then all of the just kind of background instrumentals happening and all of these beats. There's a lot of really cool sound design elements. If you put on a nice pair of headphones, you'll hear just all this extra layers and things that make the song really interesting. Another highlight for me in this song is the heavy guitar that comes in like halfway through the song. To me, this song blends all of the things that I really like about Sleep Token. The first half is that more pop influence, but it's got that kind of dark, ethereal, ambient thing going on that they do really well. And then it gives us some nice heavy stuff at the very end, which they also do really well. And all the transitions between all of these sections feel really smooth, and overall, this is just a standout track on the album for me. All right, next up, we've got track number 5, Caramel, or Caramel, however you want to say it. This was the second song that was released as a single. I know the biggest focus of this song when it released for a lot of people was the lyrical content, kind of discussing the anonymous element of the band and some of the singer's personal struggles. As someone who really only keeps up with all the band lore and all that stuff more in passive, I really just kind of enjoyed the song for what it was. I think it had some strong vocal melodies, and again, some more of that really nice sound design and synthesizer sound selections and kind of the way that they craft the beats. The opening music box kind of sound effect is something that I really liked, and there's a really cool transition. It's like a small moment between the electronic drums, like the virtual drum beats that they're using, and then the real drum set kind of cuts in. Happens around like the 1 minute mark of the song, but I feel like the real drums add a lot of groove and energy. It really helps build up to the first chorus. I think this song does that better than something like Past Self, where they do kind of have this more pop-centric thing going on, but they use those real instrumentals to really elevate the song, and I think that's something that Carmel did really well as opposed to something like Past Self. Something else we get in this song, it's a bit of a double-edged sword for me. We get a really nice heavy section, like a really good breakdown towards the middle of the song. Blast beats, some crazy double kick stuff going on, we get some screams, and it really contrasts a lot with the first half of this song. I do like this section. I will say I kind of feel like it comes out of nowhere. Something that I feel they do better in some of the previous songs on here and some of the other songs on this album is how they handle those transitions between the lighter, softer stuff into the more heavy things. I don't really feel like this breakdown is earned, if that makes sense. To me, it just kind of comes out of nowhere, especially the first time I listened to it, which you could argue that that's a nice surprise, but I think they've done some of this genre blending a little bit better, and they've handled these transitions better. And to me, it just feels almost like two different songs when we kind of instantly jump into this really heavy section near the end. That's a pretty small complaint, though. Overall, I think the song is a pretty strong one, and I would say overall that I really enjoy it. All right, moving on to Even in Arcadia. This is track number 6. We're halfway through the album now. To me, this song really feels like it could have been an album opener. I've seen a lot of fans discussing that this album could be kind of interpreted as split into two halves. I know they did some stuff with the promotion and the marketing campaign, kind of had the two houses, and put 5 songs, the first half, tracks 1 through 5, and then tracks 6 through 10, kind of onto 2 different sides of the story that they were creating through the marketing. I could see that, like, if you played this as the first track, you could kind of play it in reverse order. Or start with tracks 6 through 10 and then play tracks 1 through 5. I've seen some fans discussing that online. And if that were the case, I think this would work really well. I think it does a good job at kind of creating that cinematic sort of introduction sound. But unfortunately for me, this doesn't happen at the beginning. If you press play on this album, it happens about halfway through. And it does work as kind of a nice interlude. I do think it does a good job of marking like a halfway point, kind of making this feel like a cohesive work, like a full album rather than a collection of singles. However, as a standalone song, I don't feel that it's a very strong one on this album. I feel like it's definitely one of their weaker songs, and I don't really see myself listening to it much outside of full listens of this album. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think this is a bad song by any means. Again, I think it's carried by the vocal melodies. They do some more of that kind of vivid imagery that they create through the lyrics, which I do really like. And it does have a nice build-up. However, I don't feel like the build-up really goes anywhere. It feels very cinematic, and we kind of reach this arrival point where it kind of peaks in its intensity, but it doesn't really go anywhere from there. There's another little string solo at the end that kind of reminded me of the saxophone solo that kind of just fades out the song. And overall, I just feel like the song doesn't really have any big payoff, and I think it would work better as an album opener. All right, moving on, we've got track number 7, Provider. This has been one of my more revisited songs on this album. It's really grown on me quite a bit from that first listen. I really like the kind of organ sound and the chord progressions they've got at the beginning, and the opening chorus. I feel like, again, they've really nailed that very catchy melody, and they're really relying on the vocals and the melody writing at this point. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but if you guys can figure out which song it is, I feel like I went back and listened to all of them. There's a Polyphia song that I feel like the guitar, when it comes in, I've got it written down at the 1 minute mark. I feel like it really sounds exactly like a Polyphia song, and it's driving me crazy, and I can't figure out which one it is. But if you guys can help me out with that in the comments, please let me know. Or if it reminds you of any other song. I feel like I have heard that guitar melody before. Anyways, I think this song is very strong. I do really like that little guitar melody, even though it reminds me of something else. I think it does a good job of blending all of that atmosphere, the catchy melodies, the heavy sections, and it handles those transitions really well, building into those different kind of styles and genres that they're blending. An example of this, a more specific example for you guys, is that the section around the 3 minute mark, it starts with guitars and vocals, and there's like some ambient synth things going on. And then halfway through, there's just this like really seamless switch between guitar kind of playing this melody in the background to piano kind of playing this melody in the background. And then the piano kind of gradually fades at the very end before the sort of heavier drop that comes after that. It's little things like this that I feel like really stick out to me on repeat listens. It gives you something more to latch onto and just noticing these like subtle ways that they handle these transitions between the different styles that they're going for. I think they do this very well on this song. So yeah, really with this song, it's kind of these small transitional moments, the sound design choices, and then just the catchy melodies and the overall like vibe of this song. I find it really enjoyable, and it's one of my favorite ones from this album for sure. Moving on, we've got the third and final single released before this album came out, Damocles. This song goes in more of a chill direction, and it's largely carried by the piano and vocal melodies. I really don't have too much to say about this song, and I feel like at this point in the album, there isn't anything really new to talk about with this song that makes it stick out from anything we've already heard. I will say that the drum solos at the end are a nice touch. Overall, it's not really a bad song, but for me at this point, we're 8 songs in, there's not really anything super new on this song that offers something significantly different from what we've already heard at this point. So it definitely stands out to me as one of the weaker songs playing this album from front to back. All right, track number 9. I'm totally going to butcher this one. I think it's Jacethamine, something like that. This song for me is really one of the more unique songs in Sleep Token's entire discography. I don't feel like there's really a song where they've done this kind of thing before. It starts out pretty standard for Sleep Token, just kind of piano, ambience, vocals, but it transitions to one of the more unique riffs that they've ever written, kind of in this like math rock sort of style. And I really was not expecting that on my first listen. It was a really nice surprise this deep into the album, especially. We're one song away from the end, and they're doing something really new and fresh. After this kind of math rock thing, which just kind of happens once at the beginning, there's some more style changes. There's some heavier guitar parts, some more piano and vocal interludes. There's another kind of unique riff that they do near the end of the song. It really reminds me of some of the new stuff that Invent Animate's been doing in that collaborative EP that they did with Silent Planet. Again, just another kind of unique riff that I don't feel like we've heard something quite like it from Sleep Token before. Overall, this song to me was a really refreshing sound to hear from Sleep Token. It maintains all of those elements that I really enjoy about them, but it did still offer some surprises and more unique sounds and ideas on the guitar side of things that I really enjoy. And to me, it kind of says that they've found their sound, they've found the things that work. There's some certain things you can come to expect from Sleep Token songs, but they do still have a few tricks up their sleeve. They have a few more surprises. Overall, this is one of the top tracks for me on this album, and I'm really excited to see if they do more kind of in this sound. And just generally what else they're able to do to surprise us in future songs. And last but not least, we have the album closer, Infinite Baths. As much as I really want to love this one, unfortunately, this has also ended up being one of my least listened to from this album. I feel like pacing-wise, it feels a lot like the song Take Me Back to Eden, but it's just kind of executed at a lower level. The vocal melodies are fine, the ambient stuff is fine, the style and the transitions are all fine, but there's really nothing that super sticks out, especially being the album closer. There are parts of this song that I think are really strong, especially there's a section around the 4-minute mark that has a nice little guitar riff in the background, and it's got this kind of like swells going on. I think that was kind of a unique moment, but the problem for me with this song is that it just kind of takes too long to get to those sections. And the rest of the song just feels like a B tier of things that we've already heard them do, not only on this album, but just in general with their sound. It just doesn't feel very new and very refreshing, especially after getting the previous track that offers us a lot of kind of those new sound and new styles from them. We do get to some more heavier stuff towards the end of this song. The entire back half is one of the heavier moments on this album. I do think it takes us a minute to get there, and they're not really doing anything to retain my interest throughout the first kind of half of this song. The guitar stuff that we do get is a direct callback to Look to Windward. I'm going to talk more about this in my full detailed breakdown of this album, but there are some rhythmic callbacks in the guitars, and then there are some lyrical callbacks as well. I do think this is nice. It offers a nice sense of cohesion for the whole album, and I love when bands kind of reference themselves or tie in other songs or make the album kind of tie together. Makes it feel like a more cohesive piece of work. However, I do like this little callback section, but after that, it kind of just goes into generic sort of breakdown stuff. I think it's fine. It is heavy, but it just kind of goes on for a while, and it's a pretty simple good like guitar breakdown, just some kind of chuggy stuff. There's nothing super interesting. There's not a lot of melody to follow like in some of their other breakdowns throughout this album. And to me, it's just one of the less interesting breakdowns that they've done. Overall, I just kind of felt a little underwhelmed with this song, especially with it being the album closer. I think I was expecting a little more on my first listen, and then on subsequent listens, I didn't really find anything more to latch onto that I really enjoyed and was really making me want to revisit this song. All right, so for some overall thoughts, I'll admit on my first listen, I was a bit underwhelmed, especially in the instrumental department. There's a noticeable absence, I feel like, of guitar and real drum set playing on this album. And for me, that remains my biggest complaint about this album overall. A smaller complaint that I have is some of the songs just go on a bit too long without offering anything substantially new or different from other songs on this album. I think there are some moments where they handle some of those transitions really well and continue to offer new sections that are interesting. But at this point, in previous songs, we've kind of heard them do this before. It's a little more expected from them. And there's just some moments where I feel like they're just doing a little too much or too many styles, or just not handling the transitional moments very well between those styles. That being said, this album has really grown on me a lot since that first listen. There are some standout moments for me that really highlight what this band does so well. The strongest point for me on this album is the vocals. In my opinion, this is some of the best vocal writing that they've done so far in terms of the melody and the background vocals. The production and sound design of this album is also a highlight for me. And I think all the ways that they create the beats and the more atmospheric elements, I think that's all done very well. And it's a very enjoyable album to listen to from front to back with like a nice pair of headphones on. So in no particular order, I'm going to give you my top 3 tracks from this album. For me, it's Dangerous, Emergence, and Jessamine. For me, those really stood out as doing the things that I think Sleep Token does the best, but introducing just a handful of new elements that kept things moving in a fresh direction. Felt like really interesting songs that I have continued to revisit. Overall, I definitely would say I'm a fan of this album. I would recommend it to people who already like bands like Spirit Box, Loathe, and Bad Omens. I think those are some good bands to check out if you're a fan of this album and this sort of sound. If you like the more melodic and pop influence side of things, especially in the metal genre, there will definitely be something for you on this album that you will enjoy. However, if you're here for the more heavier elements and you like maybe some of Sleep Token's older, heavier work, you might walk away from this album like I did, feeling just a little bit underwhelmed. But to me, this band really isn't defined by their heaviness. They've always had those more pop-influenced elements and more soft sections than heavier sections on their albums. And there are definitely some softer moments on this album that I really enjoyed, and I think most people will enjoy if you've been a fan of this band for a while. So that's going to wrap things up for me. Let me know what you all thought of this album in the comments below, and let me know what other reviews you'd like to see in this style. I think I'm going to try and do more types of this content in the future, and keep your eyes peeled for a more detailed breakdown of this album. I'm going to go through with my guitar and just dissect some of the riffs and some of the songwriting and the chord progressions and all those things like I mentioned at the start of the video. So we're going to do a much more detailed breakdown of things on this channel in the coming weeks.